Voices of the Past. Jetson paced down the hallway, trying to stay ahead of the screams. The high ceilings of the Western Air Temple tended to make echoes of whispers and explosions of dropped teacups. Though the girl was back in the infirmary, being watched by the elders, her cries of pain sprang from every surface, bouncing off the hard stone. Jetson couldn't take it anymore and broke into a full run. Ignoring decorum, she sped past her sisters, ruffling robes, upsetting ink pots, prematurely ruining colorful sand paintings that were meant to be ruined only once they were finished. No one scolded her or gave her sharp looks in passing. They understood. When she ran out of floor, she jumped. The upside-down construction of the temple meant that despite its overall size, there was very little space to stand on. Nothing connecting the spires but thin air and a 3,000-foot drop. She didn't have her glider. Eminently dangerous, but she could make the leap without it. Air at her back and air against her robes gave her enough loft to land on the next tower, the one containing the great library. Searing, chief caretaker of the books, waited in front of the tall shelves. The older woman's kind eyes were edged with worry. "I saw you coming. Is it happening again?" Jetson nodded. "Misose," she said. Searing blew out a breath, a silent whistle of frustration. "That could be Misose, famous scholar of the Ruming era. There's a Misose village in Huxin. It might have been named after a founder. Or it could just be someone called Misose, in which case we're stuck." Avatars tended to run in exalted circles. Or they elevated the people around them to fame. "It has to be the first one," Jetson said. Another wail turned both their heads. The child was suffering. "Help me and it'll go faster," Searing said. "Northwest corner. Start with the poetry shelves. Rue, with the 3 drops of water radical." They split up to search different sections of the ancient vault. Jetson ran her eyes over labels and titles as fast as she could. Not every book fit on a shelf. Many of the tomes kept at the Western Temple were so old they were written on bamboo slips instead of paper. She passed rolled bales of text wider around than some of the pillars connecting the ceilings to the floors. 5 minutes later, she emerged from the library's depths, clutching a treatise on she didn't know exactly what. What mattered was the author's name. Searing met her by the door. "I couldn't find any leads. You're holding our best shot." "Thank you." Jetson sprinted back in the direction she came, the book tucked under her arm. "Use your glider next time," Searing yelled. Jetson burst back into the infirmary. The huddle of elders parted to let her through. The girl's thrashing had settled into dry, cavernous sobs. She pounded her fist on her pillow over and over, not the involuntary shaking of a fever, but rather the deliberate motion born of a steady, all-consuming anguish that should have been beyond her 8 years. "We'll leave you 2 alone," Abbess Damola said. She and the rest of the nuns filed out. Too many people sometimes ruined the effect. Jetson opened the book to a random page and began to read. "The level of risk can be determined by elevation, nearness to the source of water, vulnerability to rapid flows, and potential economic damage," she said. Confused, she briefly turned the volume to look at the cover. A discourse on floodplain management. "Why in the world do we have this book?" Jetson shook her head. It didn't matter. Understanding previous measures taken to mitigate the damage from flooding is essential, for they might compile danger instead of reducing it. The girl took a shuddering gasp of air. and relaxed. "Half a year and that's as far as you've gotten?" she said, smiling at no one. "You have to stop taking on so many projects at once, say. It worked. Thank the spirits it worked. Jetson kept reading, plowing through the unfamiliar concepts mechanically. On the subject of silt deposits— The first time the child went through this, they had no clue as to what was happening. The healers did their best to cool her fever and keep her as comfortable as they could. As the incidents reoccurred, her babbling, incoherent at first, started to coalesce into sentences, names, slices of conversations. The words meant nothing to her caregivers, until one day they heard her talking to His Majesty, the Earth King Zhou Lai, a man she'd never met who'd died 3 centuries ago. Thankfully, the abbess had thought to take notes. She'd written down every intelligible scrap, and in scouring her pages, she pieced together a pattern. The names: Ungaluk, Prau, Yotogawa. Names from every nation. Names of past Avatar companions. Not every phantom the child spoke to had made it into the annals of history, and some that had were never acknowledged as having close ties to an Avatar. Jetson could only imagine the stories lost to time filtering through the girl, merest fragments sticking in her throat. And the conversations were pleasant, frequently enough. She would laugh with her friends in towns that had been renamed, provinces that no longer existed. Jetson had watched her leap from her bed and bellow at the success of legendary winter hunts, sit on the floor and meditate with someone else's inner peace. But occasionally, she would have waking nightmares, bouts of sorrow and rage that threatened to tear her apart. She wouldn't mutter names, but scream them, as if she'd been betrayed by the universe itself. By accident, they discovered she could sometimes be calmed by figuring out the past figure she was talking to, when it was possible, and speaking back to her from that perspective. The deeper they could dive into the role, the better. Like parents reading a bedtime story, doing voices and parts. Familiarity was the best balm they had, and they acted their hearts out for her. The girl nodded off by the time Jetson reached a chapter on the proper construction of sea walls. Searing entered the room. No glider, Jetson noticed. She probably wanted to see if she could still make the jump, too. "How is she?" the librarian asked. "Better," Jetson said. "Who is Masose?" "A companion of Avatar Gun," Searing said, coming over to the bedside. "Skilled poet and engineer, who died in Ha'an when Gun failed to hold back a tsunami." Jetson found a sour taste rising in her mouth. "Failed?" Not the choice of words she would have used for someone, Avatar or not, bravely confronting a force of nature. Ha'an still stood today as a port, when it sounded like it could have been wiped off the map, along with everyone who'd lived there at the time. "It's what's written. After Masose drowned, Gun disappeared for quite a while before returning to duty." "You were grieving." If the waters that Gun fought were the same ones that killed Masose, then both the girl and the past life raging through her might have personally witnessed their friend take their last breath before plunging below the waves. They would have searched for a body in the wreckage. And worst of all, Jetson thought, they would have had to struggle with the terrible question of, what if I'd done things differently? What if? Perhaps Gun was the one who demanded the label of failure. It was simply unjust. To remember the events of a single life was painful enough. Reliving dozens of lives would be, well, It would be like getting caught by a tsunami, swept away by forces beyond your control. She's a smart kid, Jetson said. If she keeps having these visions, she'll figure out who she is long before she turns 16. Searing sighed. She reached out and stroked the sleeping girl's hair, now matted with sweat. "Oh, little Yangchen," she said, "what are we going to do with you?"